Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, January 20th of 2022, at this critical time in our nation and in the world. There has been so much that has happened within the last 24 hours, and the United States, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia are far, far closer to war than we have been in many, many years. In fact, we may have now seen the green light lit for Russia to take over the Ukraine, encroaching on Germany and in NATO, and increasing international tensions to levels not seen since the Cold War. How did this happen? Could we have seen it coming? And what can we do about it? Well, let's try and answer a few of those questions in just 1 second. But first, we want to mention that if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we thank you for joining our audience. We hope you'll enjoy your stay. We do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We speak to you on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow, to receive your chats, your tweets, and even your phone calls from anywhere around the world about these critical issues that affect us all. And we do that because we believe in the First Amendment, not just for Americans, but for everyone in the world, so that you can share your voice on what is important to you in this world, these issues that affect us all. And we hope that this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will join us as we speak about this and many other issues. And we want to hear your voice. But what about what's happening right now? The issues that are affecting us all at this moment. War. That is the question. And I have to tell you that after the performance by Joe Biden yesterday, January 19th, we're never going to see him speak by himself again. And that is a good thing. He shouldn't. He will never share a podium by himself, even though he is being fed the questions, softballs, by hand-selected media outlets just to make sure it will be as easy and smooth as possible. And yet, the gaffe machine that Senator Joe Biden was known to be has been eclipsed by Joe Biden in the White House. It's not just gaffes at this point. This is a problem. It is empowering nations that are hostile, and it is bringing the world closer to war. And he did it in just 2 comments. It's incredible. Let's understand what was said. And what was said, very simply, was in the first statement, Joe Biden, in speaking about the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, and a situation that has been growing since December, Joe Biden said, "What you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having to fight about what to do and not to do, etc." Going on to clarify, he continued and said, "There are differences in NATO as to what countries are willing to do depending on what happens. If there's Russian forces crossing the border, I think that changes everything." That statement in and of itself is insane. To have any world leader stand up, especially the superpower that is the United States, and to essentially say that it's okay, it's expected that Russia will take over another country or even portions of that other country, is insanity in itself. It is appeasement at levels that even Neville Chamberlain in 1938 never thought to do. That is how we feel about it. But that was further complicated. The words of Joe Biden were further complicated and made even worse when he combined that statement of the troubles with NATO and the expectations that Russia would be allowed to make a minor incursion, in other words, take a piece of another sovereign nation, just as they did in 2014 in the Crimea under President Barack Obama. Biden went on to say, when he was asked about what is expected to happen with Vladimir Putin, with Russia. What does he expect that they are going to do? And Joe Biden said, and I quote, "My guess is he will move in. He has to do something." Is that for all intents and purposes acknowledging that this threat of severe sanctions that the administration has made is having no effect on Putin? Asked one of the reporters. That he's actually not deterred by it? Because that is the question. That is the question that now faces the world. It is the admission by Joe Biden that for all of his bluster, for all of his statements of international policy, his knowledge and existing relationships with all of the world leaders, he is considered not just weak, as we have highlighted over the last year, but that he is both ineffectual and that he is so weak as to allow and to greenlight hostile countries taking over other countries. How did we get to this point? How could this have happened? Well, it's something that we knew was going to happen. In fact, we have been talking to our audience since January 22nd of 2021, telling them that Joe Biden's international policy is non-existent, and each of the actions that he was willing to take were leading the nation and the world into higher conflict. It started within the first 24 hours that Joe Biden had in taking the White House, when he started to take United States troops and to move them into Syria to increase the conflict between United States soldiers and the Syrian civil war. And it got worse from there. It was shortly thereafter that in April 27th of 2021, where we were discussing with our audience that one of the Biden appointees, his current climate change czar, the former Secretary of State under Barack Obama, where Joe Biden was vice president, John Kerry, was found out to have potentially taken traitorous, treasonous actions against the United States, against our only ally in the Middle East, Israel. That John Kerry was sharing information, secret information, with Iran, and not in the benefit of the United States or Israel, but for the benefit of the Iran nuclear deal, which allowed global terrorism. John Kerry said so himself. 2016, January of 2016, he admitted on national news that the United States had helped to fund global terror. As bad as that is, it gets even worse. Because it was then in June 21st of 2021 that the United States lost the Middle East for all intents and purposes. The Iran hardline forces had won the election. President Raisi had taken over, and he set his sights on the Iran nuclear deal, telling the Biden administration that he would not speak with them unless all sanctions were removed, allowing them to fund global terror at levels not seen since January of 2016. And the Biden administration started negotiating. They started trying to speak with Iran to make the deal happen because Joe Biden needed a win. Let me say this very clearly. We've said it before. The Biden administration has had an entire year of complete failure. Everything they have done has failed. And so they are looking for any kind of victory politically. They need that for the 2022 midterm elections and for any hope of the Democratic Party in 2024. There must be some success for the Joe Biden administration, and he has had none. The Biden administration needs anything, and they have nothing. They have failed at every single turn. And it reflects in his approval rating being at 33%. And Kamala Harris, well, her approval rating is at about 26%, lower than even vice presidents who have been ridiculed like Dan Quayle. Literally the lowest in modern history for a vice president. So they are desperate right now. And in that desperation, they made mistakes. Mistakes that cost lives, many lives, like those on August 30th, when we were reflecting on the fact that American soldiers had died in trying to evacuate Afghanistan. Something that we found out more information about later, but because of the way that Joe Biden ran away from the Taliban, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda. He ran away from Afghanistan as fast as he possibly could. So fast, in fact, that he didn't even bother to secure the city. As we found out later in September, the Taliban offered the city of Kabul in Afghanistan to be under the control of the United States as the United States evacuated its citizens and our allies from around the world. And instead, the Biden administration, the State Department, and the generals under his control made the decision to allow the Taliban, a terrorist organization, they gave them the control, which then resulted in the loss of over 13 lives of the United States service members, a man and woman and a child of British descent, hundreds of Afghan individuals, all of them seeking to escape Afghanistan before the Taliban were to take power, and with ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the rise, with thousands of terrorists flooding the city and that nation. But yet then we found out that Joe Biden, it's not just his fault. It's those who are serving under him with the same ideology that he has, the same progressive viewpoint of the world and the United States. We're speaking about General Mark Milley, an individual who incomprehensibly decided that he needed to unilaterally speak to China, an enemy of the United States, a communist nation that seeks to destroy all other governments in the world unless they are socialist. He reached out to them unilaterally, giving them assurances and guarantees about the United States, its military, and its military postures that no one would ever want them to know, because it endangers U.S. troops. It endangers the security of the United States. It aids and abets enemies of our nation, and therefore plunges the entire world that much closer to a world war. And in fact, emboldens our enemies, knowing that they have an insider who is critical to the United States military that will give them forewarning, and knowing that he has done this to the United States twice, he remained under the Biden administration as we went through the Afghan debacle, abandoning hundreds, if not thousands, of American citizens. And this man remains in our government, and that is dangerous, because it shows not only a weakness in the Biden-Harris administration, but also an instability and a lack of trust. And then that brings us to December 10th, where Joe Biden has decided and first hinted, it was leaked, that the Biden administration, in looking at Russia, taking advantage of all of the weakness throughout the year, all of the missteps of all of the actions of the Biden administration, we saw that Russia decided to put troops on the border of the Ukraine, 90,000 troops, and to threaten the Ukraine with its annexation. And the Biden administration, in December, started letting the world know and Russia know that it would be okay as long as they only take a small part of the Ukraine, as long as they only took pieces away from a sovereign nation against their will. It's an action that we haven't seen since Neville Chamberlain in 1938. An action that failed to bring the world to peace, an action that led to a world war and millions of lives that were lost as a result. We also realized that on December 13th of 2021, we had to highlight the fact that the Biden administration, not only is it not trusted by our allies around the world, It's and definitely not trusted and looked to favorably by our enemies around the world. But the Biden administration had lost its faith and trust with the American people because Joe Biden lied to the American people. Secretary Anthony Blinken lied to the American people. They looked in the cameras and they lied to Americans, saying first that they would get all Americans home from Afghanistan before the evacuation was done. And then after the evacuation was done, they turned around and told us there were only 85 American citizens that were left in Afghanistan that had been abandoned by the American government, civilians that were abandoned by the American government in a land that is absolutely hostile and dedicated to the death of America, whether it be from the Taliban, the ISIS, or Al-Qaeda. And while we were told that, which is abhorrent and abysmal in and of itself, we then later found out, on October 27th, we found out that the Biden-Harris administration lied, that the State Department under Anthony Blinken lied to the American public, and that over 479 Americans, at the least, and possibly 2,000 Americans, possibly even more, were actually left in Afghanistan. American citizens, not refugees, not Afghans that had worked with the United States for 2 decades and were trusted. No, American citizens were left in Afghanistan. Hundreds, if not thousands, confirmed were left. And that meant Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken, lied to the American people to our face. And the world watched in all of this, and they had to say to themselves, what's going on? Because Joe Biden was far too busy trying to convince the American people of things that weren't actually happening. He was trying to convince the American public that inflation was only temporary and that the economy was soaring and doing well. And he tried to convince the American people that a riot was an insurrection when there is no proof of that, when there is no evidence of that. And he's doing this at the time that we are seeing the rest of the world fall apart. Please, let us be clear. He's trying to convince the American people of rainbows and unicorns at the same time that we are watching North Korea fire off hypersonic missile after hypersonic missile at our allies, Japan, without any repercussion. When the United States and Anthony Blinken spoke to North Korea and said, stop this, you're breaking the international law, you're breaking various treaties, they fired even more, terrorizing South Korea and Japan with imminent threats of violence, which has not been abated to this day. And seeing all of this happening with North Korea, seeing this happening with Iran, China has continued throughout 2021 to state that they are going to take Taiwan, that Taiwan is theirs for the taking, and they are planning to move forward at any moment to do so. And the Biden administration has bumbled with that, fumbling on whether it does or does not actually support Taiwan. The Taiwanese people have no assurance, aside from Kamala Harris showing her utter disgust and contempt of President Moon of South Korea as she wiped her hand after shaking his hand on international television. This is about as bad as it gets. But it isn't, because it gets worse. It has progressively continued to be worse. When Republicans decided to make a statement against Russia, to tell the Russian government, to tell Vladimir Putin that they would not be receiving funding, that sanctions would be in place to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Democrats decided to not follow up. Let's make sure we understand what happened. Joe Biden, in his first 24 hours sitting in the White House, stopped the XL pipeline between the United States and Canada. but it also allowed China to benefit from the oil sands that Canada was trying to give to the United States for our energy independence. And Russia decided to build the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And the Biden administration helped to clear the path to remove sanctions to fund the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And when Republicans say, let's take that as an action, let's stop them, let's punish them ahead and beyond any other sanctions that may be levied against Russia, as a statement to say, don't go further, we're hurting you with this, and we will give other sanctions that will hurt the interests of Russia even more. Rather than doing that, Democrats rallied around Joe Biden and kept the sanctions away. They allowed Nord Stream 2 to continue to move forward, even as the Ukraine is endangered. This is misstep after bad calculation. As we have just recounted, you have seen the world become less stable and closer to war in region after region after region. Like many people around the world, we were praying on January 18th when Secretary Blinken stated was sent to go to Russia to try and negotiate with Russia to end their aggressions in in the Ukraine. We stated, pray that Secretary Blinken will do better with Russia than with Afghanistan. How many hundreds of Americans remain abandoned? Equally, every reason to doubt any statement of extraordinary success, considering the lies that Secretary Blinken and Joe Biden told Congress and the public. The Ukraine should be worried that we have been focused on the international policy, the non-existent international policies of the Biden-Harris administration and its missteps and failures throughout 2021 and now in 2022. But we now have to rely on the capabilities of the international negotiating style and capabilities of Kamala Harris, as covered by The Guardian in the United Kingdom. The President of the United States has been very clear, and as we, the United States, are very clear. If Putin takes aggressive action, we are prepared to levy serious and severe costs. The statements from Joe Biden were anything but clear. When he said, and we quote, what are you going to see is Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having to fight about what to do and not to do. A minor incursion, the invasion of a sovereign nation, the annexing of its land against the will of its people. That's a minor incursion. Cyber attacks, disabling the capabilities of a nation and its people to be able to function, is a minor incursion. Turning off all heat and energy during a winter, endangering the lives of countless numbers of individuals, that's a minor incursion. What in the world is Joe Biden talking about? And this is what Kamala Harris is trying to say is a clear statement to Putin not to take action. The Guardian and many international sources did not want to even cover the fact that Joe Biden went further. My guess is Vladimir Putin, will move his forces into the Ukraine. He has to do something. He has to do something with those troops. It's such a devastating, negative, terrifying idea that The Guardian didn't even want to address that comment, because Joe Biden, in saying that Russia attacking the Ukraine is a foregone conclusion, invalidates any negotiations that could possibly take place between the United States, NATO, and Russia. It essentially tells the Ukrainian people they are on their own and they will lose. Today, we went on and we tweeted to Secretary Blinken. Secretary Blinken says he had a productive meeting today in the joint efforts to deter Russian aggression in the Ukraine. We are firm in our commitment to impose massive consequences and severe costs on Russia if it chooses conflict over diplomacy. This is what he had to say, trying to cover up for the January 19th statements by Joe Biden, saying there are no serious consequences, that the sanctions, including the Nord Stream 2 sanction pipeline, will not be stopped, that they are not significant enough to deter Putin, and obviously he will continue to move forward. And the greatest superpower in the world, the United States, is not prepared to take serious action to stop him. There is no stick, there is only the carrot. How firm can you be when your boss, Biden, already accepts Russia taking the Ukraine, and Democrats protected the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from sanctions? You're playing poker with the cards face up, just like Afghanistan. By the way, how many hundreds of Americans are still abandoned there? And he made an announcement. He spoke for 20 minutes out of a 26-minute event. And of those 20 minutes that he was speaking, he explained he spent roughly 16 minutes explaining the history of Russia and its aggressions around the world, and how this has brought higher conflict and Cold War to Europe and the rest of the world. Things that we already know, and it sounds like Secretary Blinken was speaking to Joe Biden directly, because it seems Joe Biden forgot. That's what he spent 16 minutes talking about. And this is the closest he got to admonishing the Soviet Union and trying to deter them ahead of talks tomorrow, January 21st.
Of course, Russia is entitled to protect itself. And the United States and Europe are prepared to discuss Russia's security concerns and how we can address them in a reciprocal way. Russia has concerns about its security and actions that it says the United States and Europe and NATO are taking that somehow threaten that security. We have profound concerns about the actions that Russia is taking that threaten our security. We can talk about all of that. But we will not treat the principles of sovereignty or territorial integrity enshrined in the UN Charter, affirmed by the UN Security Council, as negotiable.
Please, pretty please, Russia, don't do it. We're asking you. The United States is almost begging you. Please, don't be bad guys. That's what you've just heard Secretary Blinken say. And he goes on to say more.
And if I could speak to the Russian people, I would say to them, you deserve to live with security and dignity, like all people everywhere. And no one, not Ukraine, not the United States, not NATO or its members, is seeking to jeopardize that. But what really risks your security is a pointless war with your neighbors in Ukraine, with all the costs that come with it. Most of all, the young people who will risk or even give their lives to it.
As he just said, to the moms of the Russian soldiers, please tell Vladimir Putin don't do it. He's reaching out to the moms of Russia and asking them, protect your kids, don't go to war. Please, please, stop. Stop Vladimir Putin. The moms, please reach out for your kids. That's what he just said. This is international policy at the highest levels. Please don't do it, Russia. Moms, tell Russia not to do this to your kids. This is the highest level of diplomacy that the Secretary of the United States is able to put forth. The Secretary of State. He goes further.
At a time when COVID is running throughout the planet, we have a climate crisis, we need to rebuild the global economy, all of which demand so much of our attention and resources. Is this really what you need?
So now he's reaching out to the hipsters in Russia. He's reaching out to the eco-fanatics in Russia, as if they exist like they do here in the United States, as if there is a progressive wing in Russia. That is what Vladimir Putin was raised as. He is a hardline communist. He was part of the hardline communist government. This is the level of tactics that are being used by the United States, reaching out to moms, reaching out to hipsters and eco-fanatics in the Soviet Union that doesn't care about global warming? Let's see what else he has to say.
A violent conflict that will likely drag on. Would that actually make your lives more secure, more prosperous, more full of opportunity? And just think of what a great nation like Russia could achieve if it dedicated its resources, especially the remarkable talent of its human resources, its people, toward the most significant challenges of our time.
Well, it's just war is bad. Don't you know? War is bad. We could do global warming. We could work on global warming instead because war is bad. Are you serious? Is this the best the Biden administration has to offer? Is this the best that Biden and Harris could come up with?
We in the United States, our partners in Europe, we would welcome that. Tomorrow I'll meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and I'll urge that Russia find its way back to the agreements it swore to over the decades, and to working with the United States and our allies and partners in Europe to write a future that can ensure our mutual security.
Please be good guys. Please do what you said in the past. Please, you promised Russia that you would be really nice. Please be nice.
But I'll also make clear that that possibility will be extinguished by Russian aggression against Ukraine, which would also do the very thing Moscow complains about, bolster the NATO defensive alliance.
If you're being bad guys and you do bad things, we're not going to like you.
These are difficult issues we're facing. Resolving them won't happen quickly. I certainly don't expect we'll solve them in Geneva tomorrow.
I have no answers for you. I don't know what to do. But please, give us some time. We can figure out something. There must be something that you want.
But we can advance our mutual understanding. And that, combined with de-escalation of Russia's military buildup on Ukraine's borders, that can turn us away from this crisis in the weeks ahead. At the same time, the United States will continue to work with our allies and partners in NATO, the European Union, the OSCE, the G7, the United Nations, throughout the international community, to make clear that there are two paths before Russia. The path to diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, and the path of aggression that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, international condemnation.
Which Joe Biden has said already aren't significant, and already said that Putin has already understood, evaluated, and discounted. He doesn't care. We've been documenting since 2020, actually 2019, that Joe Biden has no international policy ideas. And yet he is in charge of the superpower of the world, where it is expected that he must have a plan, and he must execute that plan, and he must show strength. We have very little faith that the Biden administration will be able to prevent the Ukraine from suffering. The Biden administration has accomplished something that no one ever thought you could do. In trying to be meek and timid and peaceful, Joe Biden has made the United States compliant in terrorizing our allies, in demoralizing those nations that look to us for help and support. Perhaps you think we've misunderstood. Perhaps you think the items we have documented for more than a year in showing you step by step the failures and missteps and miscalculations, that they do not add up to the current crisis or a future worsening of crises in the world going forward. And if we have, please do tell us. We wish to hear that. We would like to see the ray of hope, the silver lining in the cloud, the rainbow and the unicorn. We truly, absolutely do. That's not sarcasm. We want to see a better world. But we don't see that as Joe Biden speaks and as Kamala Harris struggles to try and cover it up. As Anthony Blinken restates the obvious and takes the weakest stances possible in trying to shore up the many, many leaks in the dike. Whatever your thoughts may be on this, we look forward to hearing your comments. And we hope that you'll join us this Sunday for our live stream, where we will definitely be speaking about this and many other issues that affect everyone in the world. We look forward to speaking to you at that time.